Awesome. All right. Well, while we're giving everybody a couple of minutes to get on here, I do have a topic that I promised to bring today. So we are going to talk about that, how to bulletproof, so to speak, your transaction. Um, but before we get into that, is there anything specific that somebody would like to mastermind around? Now, for the benefit of those who are new, this mastermind is not for how do I log on to command and those getting started questions. We have lots of help for that. So never fear, okay? But this is to have conversations around things that are going to really help your business move forward. Okay? Fair enough? Hey, Kier. Oh, he can't hear me because he's got earbuds in. Jackson, tell Kier hi if he can hear me. Okay. That's the team leader in Chino Hills. All righty. Anything that somebody wants to mastermind around that will help move them forward? Val.
I'll go. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of open house and I feel like the kind of the vibe has been very different this year compared to last year. So like December, November was a lot of people shy, not really wanting to talk, not wanting any information, not wanting anything, giving me false phone numbers. And I feel like January, February has been very different, or February, March. Now I get a lot of people that are very early in their search and they leave their contact information. So I have the permission to call them, but they're still very early. Like, maybe there's like an actual reason for them to not be ready yet because, the kid still finishes school or like there are actual reasons. So I've been having kind of, yeah, I don't know, like following up with those people has been kind of interesting because it's not like they're interested, but not yet ready. So I haven't quite figured out, I think, what a good kind of rhythm is to touch, to offer help. But like sometimes they don't even know yet what they want to buy. They just walked into the open house because they saw the sign, you know, that's been kind of a new person for me to deal with.
Okay.
Before it was more like yes or no. Now
Uh,
it's like, yeah. That
okay.
makes sense. Not really a good question, huh?
It does make
It
sense.
just,
I
mm.
totally understand what you're asking. So, a couple things, but first, I want you to share your win around a recent open house, and then we'll get to that.
Yeah, I've been doing a ton of open houses all through November, like November, just October, November, December, and it was very lonely and very discouraging because everyone was rude and, and just not very friendly and like leaving wrong phone numbers. And I feel like the vibe kind of changed, but I've been doing about 4 open houses a month. Um, but yeah, nothing really came from it for 6 months. I closed other transaction referrals, but nothing from an open house. And then I just closed my biggest transaction yet yesterday with at 1.65 from an open house, and I met the buyers at the open house. Yeah, like 4 weeks ago. Um, yeah, and it was definitely. I mean, it was still like we submitted offers 3 times. Like the property went into escrow 3 times, fell out of escrow every time, and my buyers kind of kept, they kept being interested and we closed. That was amazing.
And how fast?
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yay. And how fast was your closing?
7 days. Well, we submitted 7 days. We closed one day late because the sellers didn't have their documents together. So 8 days.
Uh, Now, to be clear, guys, that's a little unusual. Okay, the 8 day thing. What's not unusual is consistency over time in anything that you do will produce results. And I can pretty much guarantee, Val, if you keep doing 4 open houses a month consistently, you're going to start seeing a lot more of that business. I wouldn't count on an 8 day closing every time, though.
Well, but I mean, it was also, I mean, I knew the numbers. It was an investor and I knew the lingo. It was not just, oh, he walked in and I was
Yeah.
lucky that he came by. It was also, I had my conversations down because I'd been doing this a lot. I knew the stats, I knew the comps, I knew the ARVs, like what would this house be if it was fixed up. So I was able to pitch them on that. And they were like, yeah, you're right, let's do it.
Awesome.
So it wasn't just luck. Also, it was also work.
No, you're that's fantastic. I love that. And thank you for sharing. And I wanted Val to share that, and she shared it in the WhatsApp too, because I know that doing any form of lead generation for a little while and not seeing results for a time can be discouraging. but it just goes to show that it's time on task over time, right? Gary Keller says that in the Shift book. That's what makes it happen. But if we're just doing a little bit here and a little bit there, and oh, that's not really working, so I'm going to try this. Oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go try this. And we're all over the board, nothing's going to work. You might get lucky here and there, but you're not going to build a business on that. Okay. So, really, guys, time on task over time. And uh, I was in the value squared class the other day, and really this leads to, I'm just going to say it how they say it. We get what we deserve. So if we're really working and we're really doing the things we need to be doing, then we deserve the business, right? And if we're not doing those things and we're not getting anything, well,
And I think it's also that mindset. I feel like feeling like you deserve it, right? If like I needed to stand there and be confident and know the numbers, know the comms, because otherwise, I mean, these are experienced investors. They could have submitted an offer with the agent they used last, but I was able to connect with them also because I had the practice and I was confident.
awesome. I love that. Melissa.
Yeah, Val, would you mind sharing? Because I'm still having trouble with the whole concept of where to find the opportunity to do open houses. We tried to contact some of our market center people, and that ended up falling out. Like the agents just happened to want to hold on to their open houses and do their own marketing for themselves. So what, like, I'm just always shocked when people talk about doing, 4 open houses a month or 12 open houses a month. Like, where are you getting these opportunities from, if you don't mind
Well,
sharing?
yeah, no, totally. Because yeah, I'm a solar agent. I'm not on a team or anything. There are a couple of, I mean, I go on, on the MLS, and for us, you can see who has all the listings in our market center. So I know their names, and I went to them in person and introduced myself because they're all top agents. Like if you just text them or say on Facebook, I'm available for an open house, they're like, who are you? I don't care. They
Right.
don't have to give me anything. So I just contacted them in person and or went to an office meeting or like a team meeting that they were a part of and introduced myself, and or I went to one of their open houses and introduced myself, and then that's how I kind of became the go-to person for, honestly, like our top agents in the brokerage, just by showing up. I mean, it's like how you do one thing is how you do everything. Like you have to sell yourself to them too, right? So that they trust you. Like they gave me an open house for a $3.5 million listing that they
Wow.
don't like. That's not a property you give to everyone. And then also now I get first dips on these properties, where like the best one is, you want to do the first weekend, right? It gets listed on Friday, you want to be there Saturday. So I did both days last weekend for one of our top agents because she doesn't want to do it. She doesn't need to. And it was mayhem. It was probably like 60 groups coming through. I picked up 3 buyers that were unrepresented. And that's kind of, they were kind of at their second open house. And so
That's
that's just, I think you just want to get to that top of the list.
okay. Thank you, Val.
That's really, I love that you shared with that. Go find them, go meet them. Something we're going to put together. And for those of you that just popped on, we are going to get to our topic, but we had a question that came up that we're masterminding around. Um, we are going to be putting together an open house certification program. And so you're going to have to give us a little bit before we have it ready, but we're going to have specific training on it and specific things that you will have to do and complete in order to be certified. And then we will give you a certificate. What this is going to help is then agents in the market centers who aren't sure because you're new and they may not know you, they will know that you went through the paces to know what you're doing when you offer yourself up for the open house. And so we'll make sure that the agents in the market centers understand the paces that we're putting you through in order to do that. Please don't hold back trying to do them now, okay? Because you can be very successful without this, but it's just one thing that's going to help give you some added value to these agents in the market center. Because I mentioned on a mastermind a couple of weeks ago, open houses are going to become incredibly important to your business. Through the years, there's been different ideas and feelings and thoughts around open houses, whether they're worth it, whether they're not, all this kind of stuff. They're not great to sell the house that you're holding open necessarily. And they're fabulous for you to get actual leads of people who want to do business either now, it's definitely sooner business, or even in sometime in the next year, right? And then it's going to be more important because as we change our conversations, and just to let you know, next month, so next week we don't have a mastermind. Next week is our dark week for spring break. We will have Ask a Coaches, so we're not disappearing on you. We just don't have anything else in the calendar. Next month, the rest of the masterminds, we're going to be talking about finding and articulating your value. Because do some of you even know what your value is if you're brand new? Right? Because I promise each and every one of you has value, whether or not you've ever sold a house. You have value, and we're going to help you identify that and be able to articulate it. And then 1 week, we're going to talk about how to articulate that value and have very strong conversations with sellers. And then 1 week, we'll talk about that same thing around buyers. Okay. We're going to really make sure that you are armed, because it doesn't matter what happens in July. We're all going to be better agents, whichever direction that goes. It doesn't matter. We should be doing that now, regardless of that. Okay. And so we're going to be arming you with all of that. Now, before we do move on, oh, sorry, I don't think I completed the thought. The open houses are going to become particularly important because if things change, then buyers are going to be doing a lot more things on their own before they're willing to sign buyer representation agreements, because they'll have to when they're ready, right? So they're going to be visiting open houses. They're going to be calling listing agents. They're going to be doing a lot more of this on their own until they're ready to transact. That's when they'll sign with someone. So at your open houses, you need to know these conversations and how to articulate that value, really build that rapport and capture these leads. Okay. So open houses are going to become integral. They always have been, and even more so very soon. Okay. So before we move on back to Val's original question, I didn't forget. When it's very common to get leads from open houses that aren't ready yet, but will be, say, in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, they start looking, they start kind of doing their homework, right? Sometimes they think they're ready and then they go to the lender and find out, oops, I'm not ready. So the key is following up regularly. If you have somebody who you know thinks they're going to transact in the next 12 months, I would be at a minimum following up with them once a month. And that would be just to make sure they're on track. Make sure they're still thinking about that. Is that still their goal? Have you thought of any questions I could help you with to help you reach that goal? Right? We're just doing a check-in. And also a general rule of thumb, if somebody says that they're going to do something in a certain amount of time, let's say 6 months, cut that time in half. And that's when you want to do super nitty-gritty follow-up, right? Because they may say 6 months, but maybe things come together sooner, right? And you want to make sure you're still top of mind. And even if it doesn't come together sooner, you want to stay top of mind through the whole process. If they're a ways out, you're not going to call them every week, but you do want to find something of value to bring to them at least monthly.
Yeah, and that was kind of the struggle because they're not like they don't even know the neighborhood yet, or like I couldn't just sign them up for the neighborhood nurture, or it was yeah, just okay. What do I call you guys about now?
Well, so in that case, your next call to them should be to ask a few questions and find out a little bit. And if they're months to a year out, they may not know the neighborhood they want yet. That's okay. Ask them what areas of town appeal to you. You may not necessarily move there, but what areas of town appeal to you? Put them on those nurtures so that they can put them on the neighborhood nurture of the address that you met them in at a bare minimum, because then at least they're getting something from you regularly. And then as you have conversations, you can build on your knowledge and their ability to transact and their motivation and all of that. But always put them on the neighborhood of the house you met them in. Okay. All right. Love to see so many people here. Fantastic. All right. And love all the cameras on. Thank you. So, I put a document, I don't know if anybody discovered it. I put a document in the toolkit. It's a very basic document, but I'm going to pull it up and share it on the screen. You'll find this in the PC toolkit under transaction tools. And really, it's just a bullet point outline to help us really understand what we should be doing to bulletproof our transactions, right? Now, we say bulletproof a transaction, and yet it doesn't mean that this is going to help every single thing. A buyer can do something really stupid during escrow, and there's nothing you can do about it. And now they no longer qualify. Okay. However, there's conversations we need to have with them to make sure those things don't happen. So I want to go through this because even the scenario that I just said, which is completely out of your control, if it happens, it's not out of your control to educate them what not to do, right? Okay. So really, from the moment you meet a client, it is super important that you begin establishing, building trust and rapport. And this applies to your meeting people at your open houses, even if they're not ready right away, right? So we need to be developing that rapport from the beginning, because that's what's going to keep somebody attached to us. Then during the time that we're transacting with them, whether it's we're nurturing them to transaction or we're in transaction, we want to be showing our value, right? We want to demonstrate the knowledge we have, the skills we have, the experience we have. Now, some of you that are brand new, don't freak out when we say that, right? You may not have all of the knowledge yet, or all of the skills, or all of the experience. And yet you have knowledge, skills, and experience in many things that will still apply. Okay. And that's something that I want everyone to understand. So, those of you that are brand new, what did you do before you got into real estate? A couple of people willing to share?
I worked in property management.
Okay. So you do have a little bit of knowledge. You may not know exactly the real estate transaction portion of it, but you've got a little bit of knowledge there. Jackson, what did you do as far as, would you say that that gives you good customer service skills?
Yeah, definitely good customer service skills because I work with seniors who it was affordable housing. So even though it was like, low income, they still, some of them were pretty angry. So I understand dealing with angry and happy residents. Yep.
And so you have, and we all know that this can be a very emotional business when we get into a transaction. So that's skills, right? That's experience that may not have to do with the real estate transaction, but it translates to helping you. Melissa, were you going to say something?
Mine is kind of out of left field, but I was an ICU nurse. So
Okay.
I definitely had to deal with a lot of angry, sad, frustrated people for sure.
Okay. And you had to learn how to, I'm sure, listen to people when they had issues and have empathy, right?
Yeah.
And have good care and candor with them.
And I
Yeah.
bet you had to be very thorough and you have
Yeah.
great work ethic. And I think that's the biggest thing because I feel like whenever people ask me, oh my gosh, you're so, at the market center and your agents, what's working for you that's not working for me? And I'm like, well, it's 9 a.m. and there's no one at the office. You know, I feel like
Yeah.
work ethic is a big one too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And retaining a ton of very specific knowledge.
And working good under stress is
Yeah.
a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so many things that even if we were a stay-at-home mom or dad or whatever the case may be, there's everything that we did before we got into this business gives us some form of knowledge, skills, and experience that translate to this business. And the rest of it will come. But I want each and every one of you to understand you have value. You have value to give. And so, like I said, in future masterminds, we're going to have a really deep discussion about this and help you be able to find that what that is for you and be able to articulate that. Okay. So you're not going to want to miss 2 weeks from today. Okay. All right. So we have to always be the fiduciary. That's the first thing you learned in real estate school, right? Be a fiduciary. And that is representing your client's interest above all else at all times, including your own. So that means not worrying about what you're getting paid on that transaction. That means not worrying about all of the stuff that's going to go wrong, because inevitably, I promise you, probably your first transaction, anything and everything's going to go wrong. For some reason, it seems like the first one is the worst one, right? And you've got plenty of help behind you for it. So the key is keeping the client first in mind. Now, how do we do that? How are we a fiduciary? Well, then one of the number one things is we've got to communicate, right? The key to every single successful relationship, situation, whatever it is communication. So if you just get a client, get them in transaction, and then you don't ever communicate with them, tell them what's happening next, tell them what to expect, and you just wait till everything starts to happen before you're communicating, they're going to be so lost and frustrated. And that's not being a fiduciary, right? And part of what you want to do is build clients for life through this process. Because I promise you, they'll transact again, and many of them sooner than you imagine. And they'll refer people to you, right? So what's really key to make sure that transactions don't go south is setting expectations. And that starts right from the very first appointment. Setting the expectations of the market, how the market is doing, what's happening in the market, what's happening with offers. Also setting expectations on how to work together with a client. If it's in your calendar, and it should be, to update your clients on Friday afternoon every week before the weekend, then you better make sure you're doing that. And if it's in your calendar to do that, you need to tell them that, right? Let them know that, listen, if nothing's really happening, you may not hear from me all week, but on Friday at between 3 and 4 o'clock, I will definitely reach out to you and give you an update, even if it's just to say there's no update, right? Because that is communicating. That's making sure they understand what's happening. Okay. So once we get into transaction, or before we even get there, when we write an offer, when we submit an offer to a seller, when we tell the seller we have an offer, are we setting expectations about how long they have to respond? Or are you submitting an offer at 6 o'clock at night and your buyer's calling you at 7 a.m. all antsy because they want to know if you've heard anything? And do you even need that unnecessary interruption in your morning? You don't if you set expectations, right? But if you don't set expectations, you're going to get phone calls you don't need to get. And they're going to be on pins and needles anyway, but let's make that less for them, right? So there's lots of places along the way, once we get into transaction, that we can help both sides feel comfortable, even when things go wrong. Okay. So what's the first thing that we have to set expectations for in a transaction once we've have an accepted offer? What would you say? Janet?
The expectation will be that I can only answer phone calls up until 8 o'clock at night.
Okay.
I'm not gonna answer the phone after that, and then I will keep them informed of every new development so they don't have to call me constantly.
That's good. That set those expectations even before you start showing property to them or before you go on appointments, right? That's an excellent expectation to set. When you open escrow, Do you, or can you work with your transaction coordinator, because many of them have this, a timeline that we can send to the client so they know what to expect when? Does the buyer know when the offer's accepted, when they need to have their earnest money deposit to escrow? Right? Do they know that once we open escrow, what the next step is? Every single step along the way, whether it's you just met the lead at an open house or a sign call, every time you end one conversation, you set up the expectation for the next step. Whether the next step is an appointment, whether the next step is, okay, once you take your earnest money deposit in, you need to understand that the sellers have 7 days to get us disclosures. Right? Sellers, once you accept this, you have 7 days to get disclosures out. Right? So we need to make sure they understand that. So even though we have 7 days for disclosures and 17 days unless otherwise written for inspections and getting requests for repairs, what happens if it takes longer than that amount of time? Does the transaction just die?
I assume you would talk with the corresponding agent and just follow up and ask what's going on, give, as long as it's okay with your client, give them a little leeway and just communicate.
Absolutely. We've said it before, but communication is key. As long as everyone is moving forward, acting in good faith, the timelines really don't matter. They matter to keep us on track, but they don't matter in the sense of, okay, it's day 17 and I don't have the request for repairs. Should I do a notice to perform? Well, have we talked to the other side? Did they get all their inspections done? Are they still waiting for something? Right? So make sure that we're communicating. And as much as you need to communicate to the other side what's happening on your end, they need to communicate with you. And if they are not, and trust me, there's a lot of agents out there that don't, you need to be asking them, right? You need to keep that communication going because you're the fiduciary for your client. But we don't need to rush and get upset about, oh, they didn't do this, so we got to do this, right? It's just setting expectations. When escrow is opened and you're setting seller expectations for the next steps that are going to happen through the process, what would you think is a very important expectation to set? And there could be many, but I'm talking about a specific one.
Would that have to do when they have like their earnest money ready or no?
Okay, so let's assume that's already happened. So the contract gives us 17 days unless otherwise written in to do inspections, right? So knowing that from the time we accept the contract, it's fully executed by both sides, we have however many days it says, what expectations should we be setting? Let's talk about the seller first around that.
If they don't make any major changes to the property.
Okay.
Are we talking about setting expectations for the inspection, Jodi, itself? It's like
Yes.
letting them know that the inspection will be a very lengthy document and that most inspections have issues that are higher of concern, like high concern, which are safety issues, and that we want to focus mostly on the safety issues and really itemize what's most important to the buyer. What they can't do or do without, and then gather all the information and submit your request for repairs.
Yeah, essentially that's it. That would be on the buyer side, right? And so because of that, with the seller side, we're going to be setting the expectations that, listen, they have 17 days to do all their inspections, right? And so after they get those done, they may be presenting us with a request for repairs. Now, it's super important that you set this expectation for every seller, and it's very important that you set it for a seller who may be tight on their net sheet as far as proceeds. It's also a seller may have told you, I don't want to do any repairs. I'm selling this as is. Okay, we still want to set the expectation that I know you don't want to spend money on repairs. And if a true safety concern comes up and they present us with that request, we may want to seriously think about it. And then if they get defensive and, well, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, then we need to talk about why they may want to do that, right? Because depending on the circumstances, it could be any number of reasons. If it falls out of escrow because they can't come to agreement, now how long till we get another offer and get it in escrow? Are they paying a monthly payment that's more than what these repairs even are? And so they're going to have to pay another payment rather than just do the repairs. So there's all kinds of things that come up or that could come up that if we set the expectation before they happen, they're less likely to be a problem if they happen. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But if you go to a listing appointment and the seller says, I'm selling this as is, I don't want to make any repairs, and you say, okay, Mr. Seller, no problem, you don't have to make any repairs. That's a true statement, but that's not being a fiduciary. Right? We have to set the expectation that I understand this is what you want, and we're going to do everything to make that happen. And you need to understand that the buyer has this right. This is what they're going to do. And they very well may present you with the request for repairs. If that happens, please don't get upset because we'll talk about it at that point. Rick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
I was just wondering, Jody, how you felt about what I like to do is have the listing agent, like for my 6%, I have a home inspection up front, and then we know what the safety concerns are, and then we can kind of, say we based our price on that, especially if you sell it as is. But what are your thoughts on that?
So here's what you have to keep in mind with that. Once a seller has knowledge, they become accountable to that knowledge. And so that has to be disclosed. It's really the buyer's responsibility to do the home inspection because they have to do their due diligence, right? Even if a seller were to do an inspection ahead of time, the buyer may still want to do their own and they would have every right to. It could find other things that the first one didn't find. I know that in some of your areas, due to some of the moisture and stuff, it's common to have a pest inspection up front. It's not common in most areas, but there's a couple areas on here represented on here that it is common. That's fine. But you want to be careful not to get too many unnecessarily because it's still the buyer's due diligence.
Yeah, I just thought if we found out like it needed a new roof and stuff, or it needed this or that, we fixed it, whatever is feasible for them monetarily, and then tell them that's why we came to the price that we came to, because it needs a new roof, and then be that way we don't go through and then they have to, which they do have the right, obviously, yeah, I'm gonna promote that, but I just think it'd be ahead of the game, but I trust your knowledge, so that's
Not
why I was asking.
necessarily. If something needs a new roof, you can probably tell by eyeballing it. If it really needs it that bad. So it really, the bottom line is that's up to what your seller wants to do. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. But if it's something they're asking about and they feel comfortable and they want to do it, they have that right too.
Jody, I feel like lots of agents on the Central Coast, it's almost like more often than not they have a pre-inspection done and uploaded on the MLS.
Well, that's one of the areas that I was talking about. That is common in your area. It's not common in most areas, and it's common in your area because there are a lot of moisture issues. There is a lot of issues that often do come up in the transaction that could kill the transaction. And so, but in general, that's not common. Make sense? Okay. And if it's something that you're in an area where something like that is common, that's totally fine. So to be clear, I'm not saying it can't be done or it shouldn't be done, but you have to be careful when doing that, because now it is knowledge that the seller has, and now they are responsible to disclose that. So any of those inspections done prior to listing the home would have to be disclosed. You would attach them in the attachments of the MLS. Okay. So, but the same thing when we're talking about buyers, and Autumn mentioned this earlier, we want to set the expectations with the buyer too, that this inspection, excuse me, this inspection is going to go over everything about your house, right? So it's going to be 30, 50 pages, whatever that inspector does. We are not asking for nitpicky things. We are only looking at true safety concerns. Or something that is a genuine issue to that particular buyer. But again, you're going to want to have conversations with the other side. What is the seller willing to do? If you get the report back and see a couple glaring things, even maybe before you present it to your buyer, you might want to talk to the other side and let them know, hey, I'm going to be going over this with my buyer, but just FYI, this came up. It's probably going to be an issue. So there's things that you can do to help before they go wrong. Okay. Also with buyers, make sure they understand that home inspection, it's not just to find things wrong. That's part of what that's for. That home inspection is to teach them about the house. It's to teach them where the gas shutoff valve is, where the water shutoff valve is, how certain things in the house work. So it isn't just about finding things wrong. And a good home inspector is going to walk through the house at the end with the buyer and point out how to maintain that home. That is part of what a home inspection is for. Okay. So essentially, anything that could come up is what you want to preemptively take care of or discuss or communicate. That's key. And another thing that will often happen is the closing time is what you really want to make sure that you're going over with your clients, whether it's buyer or seller, right? Because if a loan is involved, in general, it's a 3-day closing practice. Now, oftentimes it can be done in 2 days, and once in a while, it's all done in 1 day, and never set that expectation, right? Because it's the buyer signs loan docs 1 day, the lender funds the next day, and escrow records and closes the following day. That's how it's supposed to work. Sometimes push comes to shove and they can push things through. But if they can't push it through and they can't get it done sooner, you don't want to set that expectation that it will be. Okay. Which is also why we recommend that you put a closing date, not 30 days, 60 days. You put a closing date on your purchase agreements when you're writing the offers, and that it should be middle of the week. That way, when push comes to shove, if a loan is involved and something goes wrong at the end, you've got an extra day or two for cushion so that nobody's having to wait out the weekend into the next week to close. Okay. So here's what happens next are really is the key thing for any client to keep them in the loop. Now, there's a point in the transaction, oftentimes, especially if it's a longer escrow, where inspections are done, requests for repairs are done. Now we just have to wait to close, and it's a waiting game. And maybe it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You go all that time without communicating to your client? No. And if you're going to go a little longer than normal, you want to tell them that and why. Right? But I would still do the Friday check-in and, hey, because we're just in a waiting period here and there's no new news, did you have any questions for me? Do you need help with knowing what utilities to turn on? right? So be of value to them through the process, even when it's just a waiting game and everybody knows it. Okay. So what's really key at the bottom of this document, you'll see be a fiduciary and then don't be a functionary, right? Because there's a difference. A fiduciary develops strong relationships. If you're just a functionary person, there's no real relationship there, right? So this is in no means whatsoever to discount what our transaction coordinators do for us, because without them, I personally would be a mess. They are amazing and we need them. But are they a fiduciary or a functionary? Feel free.
Functionary.
Yeah, they're functionary, right? We're the fiduciary. We're the one building the relationship with the client to create the client for life. Okay. A fiduciary accepts responsibility. So that could be a couple different ways. We accept the responsibility of getting things done when it needs to be done, and we make sure that happens. We also accept responsibility if we make a mistake. If you make a mistake, and it's bound to happen at some point, we're not perfect, right? If you make a mistake, own it, apologize, move on. That shows more value and character than trying to cover it up and hope they don't find out because you're embarrassed. Okay? A functionary doesn't accept responsibility. They do the minimal that needs to be done to get it done, and that's it. Okay? A fiduciary is somebody who takes the data. So, for instance, putting together the data of a CMA or a net sheet, interprets it and advises with it, right? A functionary just puts it together and gives it to them. A fiduciary is anticipating needs, right? So we anticipate, oh, it's getting close to the time for inspections to be done. The other side said that they're all done and a request for repairs is coming. Okay, do we sit and wait or do we prepare our seller, right? So we anticipate things that could happen. A functionary is just reactive. They don't do anything until they have to, until the problem already happens, right? A fiduciary is somebody who focuses on the outcome, making sure they're doing everything possible to get it done. And a functionary just simply does the tasks until they're complete. A fiduciary educates and guides. Tell Troy and CB hi. And I'm gonna one of the takeaways that we had, and Emily actually had this takeaway, and I love it, and we're going to incorporate it into things, is we are a consultant. We're not a salesperson just trying to sell and tell, right? We are a consultant to educate and guide them. A functionary is somebody who just tells and sells. That's not who we are. It says salesperson on our license because, by definition, we sell houses, but we're not salespeople in that sense. You can't sell someone a house or make someone sell a house they don't want to, nor should we. We need to educate, guide, advise so they can make the best informed decision for their circumstances. Okay. A fiduciary is someone who's irreplaceable. You have so much value, they'd never even think to go elsewhere. A functionary, I used this person this year to get my taxes done. They did a good job, but you know what? This one's cheaper. I use that example, and yet my tax person is a fiduciary and does such a good job, I wouldn't think of going anywhere else. But that's an example of a type of thing where you could think that, right? And then a fiduciary, this is someone who's paid well. They're paid for the value that they give. A functionary is not paid that well. They're paid for a task. Right? So which one are you going to be? Thoughts, questions, ahas? Don't be shy.
I like the idea of presenting ourselves as consultants rather than salespeople. That's really what struck me. My dad and I were working on our scripts today, and specifically for the buyer. And it's a little bit of a struggle to do that, to comfortably come back at those challenges. But I think having an umbrella idea of what you want to present yourself as, and then filling in the tasks below that, the specific things, if they need specific of why you would want me to work for you, to be the fiduciary for you. Considering yourself a consultant rather than a salesperson, I love that as the umbrella term.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think we should get in the habit of calling ourselves that, right? Realtor, consultant. The exact note as she wrote it is, I'm a real estate consultant, not a salesperson. My goal is not to sell and tell, but to educate and guide. And that was taken from the Value Squared class on Monday or Tuesday that we attended. Has everybody here attended that? Many of you? If you have not, there are 2 more. I highly recommend you attend them. And they're adding to it and changing a little bit. So they have even said, if you've already attended, attend again. Okay, any other thoughts, comments, ahas?
I had a question. It might not be directly related to this though. So, I mean, is this still inappropriate? Okay. So I worked with our title company, and she was able to get me like a micro farm list data. Is that something you would add to your command database, or not until they truly became a contact? Because I'm planning on doing a targeted mailing to them.
Hmm.
Is that something you add to your command database, or not just yet? Like
So
all those names.
if you have, well, if you're going to do mailing through command, or if you have an email for them, I would add them. But what I would do is I would make sure and tag them as like farm. Don't
Farm.
tag them with SOI, so they're not
Okay.
coming up and getting mixed in with that.
Sure.
So you can add anything you want to command because you can set tasks and reminders. If you're having a 500 person farm, I wouldn't throw that in there unless you're using command for it. Just make sure it's tagged properly. That's the key.
Okay. It's not a lot of information. It's basically name, address, when they bought, the house details. So it's not like calls or emails or anything. I'm going to do a targeted, like, actual mailing.
Yeah, because if you don't have an email address,
Yeah.
you can't send them, neighborhood nurtures and things. But that would be a
Right.
good reason to reach out to them to try to get that. So I would definitely add them as you talk to them and get contact information.
Okay. Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone. We will not see you next week, but in 2 weeks, we're going to bring the values. So make sure you're here. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you, Jodi.
Bye-bye.